Please stand by. Basically, I'm going to set up this particular encounter and rule set, and also the beginnings of this D&D Essentials Kit that came out last fall. Usually I'll use Lost Mine of Phandelver, but actually this module segues into that module if you have both. You can actually combine them in the whole campaign. This adventure or the Essentials Kit, it also features some module load as well. So, without further ado, I'm going to get going on this, but I want to make sure that nobody has missed out on anything. So you signed up for DM102. Thanks for doing this. Now I'll be taking out of order. Yeah, that's okay. No matter what class you take, you're going to take away something different. So from videos and also from other teachers, you're going to learn a lot of different things. So if you guys haven't joined Fantasy Grounds College, it's www.fantasygroundscollege.net, and we provide the best we can as far as current knowledge and helping people learn how to use virtual tabletop fantasy grounds. If you haven't checked it out or you don't know anything about it, check out fantasygrounds.com. That is where you can get a demo. Not sure how to use the software, or you're kind of intimidated, join our community. If you go to our website, it's linked, the link below the video if you're on Twitch. If you're not, our community YouTube also has the links to our community website. Right on the front page is the link to our Discord. So that is a place you can come and learn how to use Fantasy Grounds. And there's more than one rule set. We have other people who are interested in other rule sets. If you like Call of Cthulhu, or maybe you like Pathfinder 2 or something like that, these tutorials that I'm going to show will actually translate and pertain somewhat to those rule sets. So a lot of the information will be similar. Also, not to mention that anything I teach you now technically should transfer over to the new Unity that's coming up next month. So whatever you learn from these videos, or taking our classes, or from other people, will still be valid. So sit back, relax, and I'm going to go in depth on how I would do this. By no means is this the way to do it. You can do it your own way. You don't have to exactly follow everything I do. A lot of the things I do are for my own benefit, but then I also use it to illustrate how fantasy works. Once you get the basics down, start understanding how it's set up, how it operates, you can do it any way you like. This is just a guideline. And also, I'm not really here to teach you D&D per se, so I'm not going to focus on the rules of Dungeons & Dragons. So if I get something wrong, or if I leave something out, or even if you have some questions, go ahead and leave it in the chat, or if it's on YouTube, just leave it in the comments and we'll try to get back. But as far as, how the rules work, that comes with time. So that's not something I can teach in one session. So again, let's get together here and let's worry about Fantasy Grounds and how am I going to set this DnD5e Essentials Kit to run a table for my players. So I'm going to assume that I know very little or nothing about Fantasy Grounds. So one thing you want to know about Fantasy Grounds is that it's not a video game. It's actually a database. And it's based off of Lua script, C#, and XML. It is not something that is easily digestible in one session. You have to put some time in. So I'm going to put some time into all of you by showing you how I know how to use it through the front end of it. The back end stuff, you'll have to go to the forums and get help with that. But as far as creating content, that sort of thing, I would worry about that a little bit later down the road. So here we go. So now this is the launch screen. If for some reason you're not sure what your license status is, I have version 3.3.9 Ultimate. Now, if you only have the standard edition, it probably won't say anything at all other than the version. And then if you have the demo, it should say demo up here. Now, with the demo client, you will not be able to host anybody. So if that's all you have, then you're going to have to eventually upgrade and get some sort of license. So I'm not going to explain what all the licenses do, but just be warned that the demo client is very limited and it only has the SRD of the basic rules. If you plan on DMing, eventually you're going to have to get some content, but until you do, watch these videos and come into the college and learn all you can before you make the investment. That's the best advice I can give. So if you need to get into the directory, there is a folder in the upper right corner. It says Open Data folder. So if you click on that, that'll take you into the subdirectories. Another thing is, on Tuesdays, like today, before this lesson, I updated Fantasy Grounds. And I'm not too worried about it because I'm going to start a whole new campaign. But if you're running a campaign, you do not want to update right before you get ready to play. You want to give yourself a couple days just in case something breaks or something's changed. Another thing is, just right off the get-go, if you try to use the built-in test campaign or the demo campaign, it won't let you change it. It'll just let you kind of look around. So even if you have content or the demo demo campaign that's built into Fantasy Grounds doesn't let you alter or change it. It's actually read-only. So I'm going to actually create my own campaign. So create campaign. And then you can see you have all these different rule sets. Now I'm going to use 5th edition because that's the one I'm most familiar with. But I do own Savage Worlds, some Call of Cthulhu, Pathfinder 2. And I think I have Pathfinder 1 a little bit, and maybe some other stuff. But basically, this is what it comes with. Usually you get a very pared down or basic rules. I believe Call of Cthulhu and Savage Worlds, you actually have to buy the core rules, but everything else comes with a very basic rule set. So I'm going to go ahead and click on 5e. I'm going to give this a name. So I'm just going to call this the D Essentials DM Tour or something like that. I'm not going to put my username or password. If you're going to use any extensions, which I recommend you research and figure out what they do before you implement. But I'm going to select this theme that was made for our community. I'm also going to select this Rob2e module loader, which makes things a little more convenient for me. And I'm going to load up the this theme that was created for our community. I have a GM icon. I have this font that makes the font a little bit clearer, and I have this Founders Day theme. I'm not gonna elect to put that on. I don't want to confuse people. And I think that's pretty much all I need to add. I don't want to add too much. Really. If you want to add more languages like fonts for the rule set, you click on this 5e language fonts, and this is put out by Wizards of the Coast. It'll match the ones that are in the player's hand. Yeah, C#. I know about the Laerun XML. Any document? No, there is no documentation. That's pretty much behind the scenes stuff. I think just the basic GUI is based on that, and some of the other instruction calls, but they don't let anybody have access to that. That's kind of under the hood. So I'm not sure about that. There's really no documentation about any of it, unless you are one of the core developers. And they also have their own parsing tools. So all that stuff's proprietary to Fantasy Grounds. But people who know how to use XML and Lua can kind of write their own extensions to work side by side with Fantasy Grounds. And generally that's a community effort. So there is no, here's how you do this. There are videos out there and such, but really it's very obscure and you have to talk. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about this connection. So this seems to be one of the biggest problems that Unity will address when it comes out. So there's a connectivity requirement where you have to allow people to connect to the computer. I'm not going to cover how to do that, but you need to understand port forwarding. You need to understand how your antivirus and your firewall protects your computer from outside intrusion. So this particular software uses peer-to-peer. It's kind of an older technology. When Unity comes out, it's going to be a little bit better. But for right now, you have to get past the firewall of your computer, also potentially your antivirus, and you have to learn how to set up port forwarding. Fantasy Grounds uses port 1802. And if you can't get it to work, you can go to the official forums and ask for help. Sometimes you'll have to use a virtual private network, a VPN, to get around that problem. Or potentially you might have to just wait until Unity comes out if you still can't get any help. Quite often you can call your internet service provider and they can help you with certain steps. But I'm going to go ahead and click Run Test. And you want to do this before you go out and buy a bunch of stuff. So if you can get this to be successful, then more than likely you'll have an easier time hosting people. If you're just a player, you don't have to worry too much, as long as the DM has to. The other thing is this alias. If you enable this and you click generate, it will create a new passphrase that people will use to enter your table. So it's kind of like a gate code. And then if you want a password, you can. So I'm going to go ahead and hit start. While that's loading, yeah, AT&T, pay attention to flood controls. Yeah, I've seen that. Also, if you have an IP6 connection, it won't facilitate Fantasy Grounds. A lot of third world countries and new internet infrastructure are going towards IP6 because we're running out of IP4 addresses. Sometimes it's just a matter of calling your internet service provider and asking them if they have both available. See if you can switch. So I have a horrendous load time in Fantasy Grounds because I have a ton of content. So if you're brand new, try to keep your content under control. I have like 50,000 modules, thousands of tokens. And then I also have a bunch of third-party content. All right, so here we are with the D&D Essentials tutorial. Right now, I'm in the main loading screen. One of the things I want to cover here before I close the campaign setup is the layout. It's very, very important to be conducive to running games. So the first thing I'm going to do is resize some windows, get all that stuff started. So here you have this big chat window. If I right-click on it, click on some research, like you can clear it. That is only if, for the side. Also, I can right-click on it, unlock the position, and then I can drag it over and make it smaller. I don't need it huge. That tall, I don't know why it defaults to that, but that's how. So that's the default location. And then I'm going to open the combat tracker, top right. And this is generally where I place it, and I will stretch it out to accommodate more combatants and player characters. Then I size the chat window, line up with the right-hand side of this, and that generally takes care of the alignment. Now, next thing I'm going to do is right-click on the chat window and lock the position. And then if I go to the options menu, I can actually turn on the dice tower. So if you want to use the dice tower, it's a handy little tool for storytelling. And then if you have content, you'll also be able to switch the graphic out. So Smiteworks Dragon is the default. Then I have this FTC banner, and then you can turn it off. So I'll turn this on just for the class thing. Usually when I'm running games, I turn it on. So I'll come back to the options menu. So now I want to enable some content. And I want to turn on the dice tower just so I can show you where I place it. So basically in the options, I want to click on table dice tower. Turn that on. The players on their side can see the dice tower, whereas I don't, because by default, the rolls that I make, they are hidden by default. If I turn on chat show GM rolls, if I turn that on, the rolls are no longer hidden. They're out and open so everyone can see. So if I want to take advantage of a hidden roll, I have to take the dice tower and drop the 20 side, or whatever check you're doing. So I'm going to right click the dice tower. It is now available on my desktop and turn both of those on. So they're dependent of each other. And then after I unlock it, I'm going to drag it over and drop it right here. Switch dice, lock it. So this will help kind of keep your desktop and organized. Now when I drop the dice in, it rolls a hidden roll, and only I can see the results of the players. And the same is true on their side. When they roll, they can roll into the dice tower, and only you can see the results. So it kind of emulates the old school days where you were rolling behind the screen. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to right click on here and clear all that. I'm kind of OCD about that. It's clear. And then in the setup, you have this handy little window here. This takes you to user manual, wiki guides, forums for help. If you click next, this will load up the 4 rule books if you want. So if you click on 4 rules, it will load up just the 3 main rules. I'm not going to do that this time. I'm actually going to just leave it that. But I am going to load the Rob 2e coding effects later, but I'll do that manually. And I don't even think I'll need to use them here, but if I do, I'll load them later. So if you're going to unload or load the SRD or the basic, and if you want to load basic modules, you can load it here, which is a shortcut. So instead of going to the library and go through here, we'll take it. So I'm going to go ahead and start looking for the books I want to. So if I go to here, this is the search window in the data module activation. So it says Essentials, so I went ahead and loaded that. And then I'm going to load the Sword Coast Adventures Guide. If you don't have this, no big deal, but it is a very good supplement to have when you're running content that takes place in the Sword Coast. So here you have the Sword Coast maps, you have the player's guide, and you have the campaign guide. Well, for right now, I only need the campaign guide and the maps. I don't really need the player stuff because I don't have anyone connected making characters. But if you did, you could load that. It could be available for them because you have this little green check. If for some reason you didn't want them to have access to any of this material, you could click on that and change it to a player load block, so they won't be able to load the content. But in this case, there's no reason why you need to block it. And that is how you make material or books accessible to your players if they're not already. Usually a player's book is by default already active, but you still have to load it in order for it to be available for the player. You still have to click on load. In this case, I'm going to unload it. I don't need it right now. I'm also going to probably grab the, there's 3 modules that come with the Essentials Kit. So I'm going to just search for D&D. And anything with that title will come up. So here's Icefire Peak, which is one of the modules that's featured. There's I already got the Essentials Rulebook. That's already done. And then there's 2 other modules that come with this game indirectly. They're like add-ons. And they were published after the Essentials Kit. They are add-on modules that will add on different adventures and make it so you can continue that particular campaign setting without having to go out and buy a bunch of other stuff, be interrelated. And then if you search over here by author, let's see. So I just typed in wizard, and that brings up all the Wizard of the Coast stuff. So if you need to search that way, you can. So I'm going to go up here. Here's the 5e Unearthed Arcana Player's Guide, which costs $1 on the Fantasy Grounds store, but I think it's free on Steam. I don't know why it's different, but there's a reason for everything. Let's see. So I'm going to make sure there's no other content that I want to load. So I have the Sword Coast Adventure Guide apps, which the reason I loaded that is so I can have access to the setting where it takes place. And then I'm looking down to make sure I haven't missed out on modules or add-ons. So here's the other one. You have Divine Contention, you have Wizards of the Coast, Sleeping Dragon's Wake, and you have Stormlord's Wrath. So those are the add-on modules. I think you get Icefire Peak for free, with the setting, but if you want the additional adventures that go up to higher levels, you can do so. And those are sold separately on the Fantasy Grounds store. If you know what you're doing, you can actually enter those yourself, but it does take a while, so it's handy to already have them. So now I've loaded those. I think I'm happy with that for right now. And just in case, I might load the monster manual, but I don't think I'll need it because a lot of those modules, the starter kits, are self-contained. So if I need it later, I'll. If you don't have the player's handbook, you can load the SRD and the basic rules, which is very pared down, but it will give you a basis to start. So at the minimum, you want to load the SRD. So I'm going to click this DnD5e SRD. What that does is it loads all the SRD rules, and you get the confirmation. So that's a bestiary, a data module, and some magic items. So at the minimum, if you buy this kit, you'll want to have that loaded. And then you don't really need the basic rules because they're redundant. And that would be only if you didn't have any of them. This also applies to Lost Mines of Vendel. Run that, same thing. You want to load it. So that's the very foundation of everything built. And then if you have the player's handbook, you can load that instead. So I'm just going to go off the SRD. And then I've already got some stuff. And then if you are inclined, the next step is set up this token. So you can load the free tokens. Those come with Fantasy Grounds. You get animals, characters, tokens. They're not too bad. They're top down. Free letter tokens. That is something that I suggest you enable. There's the same token with the base, so they're a little bit easier to see on the battle maps. And then you have the token, the Devon Token Night Bundle. I wouldn't click on that if you own more than 3 or 4 of those. They can potentially crash Fantasy Grounds, especially if you own damn near every one of them. So be very careful. And then click next, and that takes you to the options. So we'll go over some of the options as we go. That's that. We got the data module activation. Now, for some reason, if you want to go back to the setup, you can click setup and options. It takes you back to the beginning. If you don't want this to pop up every time you start the session, you click on show on load and not. So I'll just go through and finish it. And now that takes you to the options menu. So it's kind of a round robin. It's that. So I will come back to the options. Click that. So the first thing I'm going to do is lay out how this thing works. When I mean this thing, I'm talking about Fantasy Grounds for this adventure, this particular setup. So what I'd like you to do is go to the library. You have it. And you'll notice that I have items loaded in books. So here's the core rules and then the essential kit rule. I have a map pack from the Sword Coast loaded. I have the Sword Coast Adventures Guide. You don't really need it, but it's handy to have. It also gives you more lore about the area. Then you have Icespire Peak, Divine Contention, Sleeping Dragon's Wake, and Stormlord's Wrath. So those are the adventures that coincide with the D&D Essentials Kit. And potentially they can coincide with the Lost Mine of Vandel. It takes place in the same region or similar region. So now what I'm going to do is explain a little bit about the library view. Up on top, you have different views. If you're the host, click GM. It brings up all of these banners on the right-hand side for the host. If you're just a player, click play, all the play buttons. If you want to build a character, click C. If you want to explore product, setup, or create your own content, click on all. Again, that's in the library. So once you have all your books loaded, will have access to them. If you want to look at the reference manual for the actual book, click on any given module, provided it's official. Some of the third-party content do not have this one does. Click on reference. I'm going to close the library. It brings up the rules. So here's the introduction. Click the arrow. Well, it tells you how to play. This one covers creating characters. So when you create a character, it tells you the steps. Now, again, if you've never created a character in Fantasy Ground, these steps will not work unless you do it in Fantasy Ground. So they've already added that. So if you look at this, this tells you you should pick a race, class, determine your ability scores, describe your character, choose equip. Well, actually, in Fantasy Grounds, you need to do the ability score. Then you add your background race, and then so just be very careful. We cover all this. So you have access to the actual, so it knows how to play. It talks about advantage, disadvantage, saving throw, checks, and what the stuff is. This particular supplement is more, whereas Lost Mine, it talks about role playing. Speaking of which, we have a class coming taught by one of our teachers, and this is an RP 101 class. So if you want your players or yourself to have a better time with role playing, trying to get over the fears, take that class. It's coming up in college. So this is just going to go through and talk to players about how the stuff works. Some additional stuff, sidekicks or NPCs that your players control. It also explains conditions, what they mean. And in fantasy conditions, we cover the top corner. There is it's like a running man. So this is condition effects. So deafen is here. All the buttons here are covered in the so there's fright, grapple, capacity. So a lot of this is already covered in the base of Fantasy Grounds, but it is good to know. So that's what you get with the reference manual or the actual basic section. Now there are additional modules. So if I go to the library, we'll start off with module fish, but I think they're set up. I think I Spire Peak. That's the one I'm focus on. I only loaded the other ones to show those, and potentially there might be some lore and there might be others too. So that is your library. So now what I'm going to do is show you how fantasy works. So right now I have the library working. Have a section which correspond with some of these banners on the sides. You can counter random images, magic items, NPC, treasure parcels, quests, tables, equipment, and reference. So reference manual doesn't have its own banner. And if it had any pre-gens, it do. So if you go to this D&D Essentials, it might have some pre-gens, but if it doesn't, it's more set up. That's all. Now this particular model doesn't come with pre-gens, so it's assuming that you will. So let's assume and for your work. So close this. And what we're going to do is lay this out the way we want. Meaning, once I get everything, start with this. So I'm going to go ahead and start with story. It's an important part of it. You have your visuals. Second, more important part. So this is the head. This is the heart, the body, the soul of it. Then you have NPCs, which are your monsters, characters. Then you have your actual counters. So counters are made up from NPCs. Then you have items. So your items make up parcels. Parcels are just bundles of treasure. Whatsoever you get point, treasure item, equipment, weapon, magic, whatever, or combination. And then there's two other auxiliary. There is table, which are your randomization. Then you have your quest. Quest items are basically where your players get milestones. So if you do some of these quests, reward it. So now the next thing I want you to think about in these different is how they're organized. So not only they numbered for alphabet, they have these chapters, and then they're also in individual groups. So if you have this selected to all in this specific category, you're looking at every single thing you don't necessarily want. So what you want to do, since you're going to worry about this Dragon's Fire Peak first, let's filter that. If I scroll down, here's the NPC, Dragon, Ice Fire Peak. That's the NPCs. D&D Dragon of Ice Fire Peak. There are the encounters. I'm going to also go Ice Fire. That's the maps and areas. I'm going to also build a list. 00 Dragon Ice Fire Peak. This is the beginning of that. Same thing with the quest item. Tables. Parcels, same thing. And the items themselves. Dragon. So this is how it's organized. So you have two arms, your body, your head. Think about it that way, like a robot or a person. You can't get this from. This is just a way to understand how these things. So what happens? Make a story of it, and then create your chapters. Copy and paste in the text, and then you also build the NPCs, counters, any quest item, table. You create your parcels, items. So all those get tied into or basic into the story maps. So the story entries and the maps are kind of what everything is centered on for the images, and then everything else is kind of in those sections. The audio is fading in now. So there a way to set that globally, or do you have to do it for each item? Be nice if you could just state module X and only see stuff for it. Yeah, so the all is the default. The other thing is the fact that the way Fantasy Grounds is laid out, it actually has stuff that is combined in all the other libraries, and that would be the all section. So that you would see everything you have loaded in your library. Hopefully that helps you. And then each one of these groups is dedicated to a header or a directory or the main chapters within a given book. So that is how you organize these. But if you wanted to look at the SRD, then you'd have to unfilter it. But in this case, I'm only going to be looking at the NPCs in this case for Dragon of Icespire Peak. So that is how these are organized. Hopefully that helps answer your question. Yes, thank you. I had the actually had the mic away from my mouth. So let's see what else. So now we have all this information. This is how it's organized. So once that happened, then I'm going to start getting into how to lay this out, how to organize it so it's not such an overwhelming thing. Most people, when they start playing, they get overwhelmed by all this data. It's really not for you to focus on every single thing at once. This is just broken into modules, and it's in a modular format, so it makes it a little bit easier to mix and match and also to customize. If you want to run it straight through like a module and you're playing around a table and you're not online, you can actually just pull up one of the reference manuals and run it straight from this library view. But if you want to use it more like in a Fantasy Grounds fashion, then it's set up more like this. It's more modular, and you can use this as you see fit. So basically, as a DM, your main goal is to, one, get familiar with how this is laid out, and then you want to learn what type of data you need to reveal or to share or to focus on at any given time during the course of a session or a campaign. So honestly, all you're doing is presenting data or photos to your players at a given time, and that's all you're really doing, other than telling a story on top of what you're showing. So it's really not that difficult if you think of it more in a base term. So improvising, storytelling, knowing the rules, those things come with time. You're not going to know how to do all that at once. That's going to take some time. But what you should know is where everything is, how it's presented, and which data you're going to focus on or which chapters you're going to look at while you're prepping for your campaign. And honestly, you don't even have to prep. If you really know Fantasy Grounds well and you're very experienced, you can probably do whatever you want. But I do a little bit of prep because I really think that it's important to have some content ready to go in case your players go off the rails, that sort of thing. You can really take the problems of random problems that come up and you don't know how to adjust to it or how to take care of it. So you want to have some stuff prepped. It really helps. So one thing I do is I want to see a regional map. I want to know basically whereabouts does this adventure take place. So in this story for session 0, I'm going to set up some notes. Now you can use notes. They are separate from all of these. Notes do not export. You cannot use them in another campaign. They are going to stay with this session. So I don't plan on saving these only with this session. If you want your notes to export to other sessions or other campaigns, then you're going to want to make a story entry instead. But I'm just going to use notes just to keep these separated and for ease of use. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to activate the calendar, and this is built into Fantasy Grounds. So if I click on modules, I have to activate it. It's actually a module that's built into Fantasy Grounds. It's free. And yes, you can make your own module or your own calendars. So here is a calendar. I'm going to load that module, and it shows all the different worlds. You have the Pack worlds for Starfighters. You have Ravnica. You have Traveler, Greyhawk, Pathfinder, Forgotten Realms, Eberron, Greyhawk. I mean, it's got a lot of different settings here. So I'm just going to use the regular standard calendar. So that helps me keep my games organized. So once I click on this, it dedicates this particular calendar module to the Gregorian or the standard calendar. Next thing I'm going to do is set the year. So it is 2020. And the era is AD. Once I set that, and you click on this set selected as current date, once you set that, it'll start changing the days of the week. So technically, if today's Tuesday, the 7th, that should line up here, and it does. So if I double click on here, today is going to be like my session 0. So I'm going to call it that. Or you can call this a research thing, whatever you want to call it. So that's my notes. And I'm going to link this calendar to this note area. That way I have a running journal and a calendar, and it even brings over the date. And then I'm going to set the time and the actual date here. So the time we're going to get together, or I'm going to work on this, is going to be, let's say, 2:30. And the way to switch the time is to click in the cell, hold down the right control key, and mouse forward. So we're going to meet at 1:30 p.m. today, or maybe 3:30. There we go. That's how it'll be in the future. And I will click this to set the date in the calendar. So now it says Tuesday the 7th, 2020 AD, 3:30 p.m. So if I click here, it actually shows the date. And if I click here, it shows the time. So you can use this as a marker in your chat log, because when you use Fantasy Grounds, by default, this chat log is ongoing. And in your campaign folder, you can bring this up and see if things were messed up or if you made any mistakes, or you can audit what happened in your last session if you feel inclined to do so. The other thing I do is I'll take this log, and the players might want to put something on here. They'll have access to the player side. So if the players choose to do so, they can access this. I'm just putting this note in here. And then what I'm going to do is link this calendar entry over to the session 0. And then the time, I can drag this time right here. And then if I wanted more detail, so that puts the date, the time, and then there's a journal entry link here. So, and if I wanted to, I could put that in there as well. So you can link, drag, and drop things together. The next thing I'm going to do is drag the session 0 note into my calendar. So now they link back and forth. Regardless of what I do, I have some notes for it. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. And what makes this nice is I can look at the log entry, and once you get more than one entry, it creates like a journal, and it helps you keep organized with what happened on what days and that sort of thing. So it kind of gives you a rough journal / notes type thing. And then if I accidentally close, let's say, the log or the calendar, I can pop up the journal entry, and it'll come up. And vice versa. If I was in the calendar, I can pop up some notes from a previous session. So that is my session 0 date, start time. And now if I wanted characters to basically be a part of the campaign, we'd either build them or import them or use pregens. In this case, I'm going to import. So I'm going to go to PC, And I'm going to click on this import character, which is this blue arrow. And then I'm going to click import again to confirm. And on my desktop, I have several different creatures I've made, or PCs. So I imported one, and now I'm going to import maybe a couple more. So there's 2. There's 3. And 1 more. All right, so when I click this blue arrow to go back, there are my 4 characters. So I have this Wilbar Brightspark, Daedra Darkstalker, Amber Frostbeard, and Moo Shakalaka. Now these are characters that I've been building over the last couple days. So I'm not paying attention to what level they are, but they're not too high level, and Wilbur is actually first level. So we have a Dwarven Cleric, Amber Frostbeard. So she's going to be put on the combat tracker from the character selection. This is the first thing you do. And then Daedra, same thing. Moon Shakalaka, and Wilbur. So now those 2 don't have any sort of tokens. So I'm going to open up the character sheet and give them something. So Amber, usually I'll give her, I have like a default. Here's her token. And then for Wilbur Brightspark, I think I made a token for him. If I go to token, I go to PC. Pretty sure I thought I made one for him. Let's see. If not, no big deal. Yeah, so I'm still working him out. So basically, I'm not going to get into how to make tokens, but you can make your own. And actually, this is Amber's token. So if I go here and I drag this token over, that's her actual token and not her portrait photo. So I'm going to go ahead and use that. And then I can drag this also over to here, and that replaces the default one. So Wilbur, I am just going to pick one, a random one. So I'm going to double click here on the portrait and go to collected. And if I had any in here that I could use, I would use these. But I'm not going to use those. So with the rule set, you get some extra photos. So here's some gnome, because that's what he is. So he's a gnome artificer. So I'm just going to use that for his picture. So that's my characters for the campaign. So the next thing I'm going to do here is unlock the note, and I'm going to drag over the characters one by one. And then after, I'm going to put the players' names. Or their Discord name or email address, whatever you need. Especially if it's a new table and you don't know everybody. I usually put their email addresses and all that stuff right here. So I know who's in my game, and if I want to look their character, I can just pop it up right from the notes. This is not necessary, but it is a way to organize. So these are my player characters. This is the date and the time that we do this. And then the actual campaign notes are going to go here. So this is just a way to keep things organized. Hey, how you doing? So if you're late, we're going over how to set up the table for the 5th edition rule set. This is for the D&D Essentials Kit for Fantasy Grounds. So that's what we're doing. So right now, all I'm doing is setting up for the campaign. So I already showed how this information is organized and how it's separated. So for the time being, I'm going to close NPCs and encounters and the quests and the tables. The only thing I'm going to leave open for now is the story entries and the maps and images, because all those other things are tied into this. So I'm going to do that. And here's the maps of Icespire Peak. So if that's the case, I'm going to use that adventure. I'm going to select that adventure. Before I had it on just the NPC photos. So this time I actually got the maps. So there's magic items to show you what they look like. In this case, I want the maps. So this shows pretty much the Sword Coast. Let's take a look at that. This is the player's map. So generally, the players will have a view like this, and it's kind of important to have this. Now, if you already have played Lost Mine of Phandelver, they suggest you start Neverwinter, or if you've played in some of the other games. But in this case, you don't have to. You can start wherever you like. But I'm going to shrink the map so that, and I'm re-stretch it so it's not so huge. So I'm going to right-click on the map, and I'm going to click on resize and small size right now. So here's the main map that has all these pins. Now the red pins the players cannot see. You don't need to worry about that. And I'm going to right click on the map, click the resize, and I'm going to adjust the vertical, and that will stay pretty much this size. I might make it a little bigger. Let's see. If I drag it from the bottom right corner, stretch it up to here to the top, and just kind of make this a full section here. And then I'm going to right click, resize, and adjust the vertical again. That recenters it. So majority of this module takes place down around here around the Sword Mountains. Phandalin, the Tribord Trail is here. You have the high road. You have an adventure or a stop along the way. And then you have the city of Laerun. You have the Mirror of the Dead Men, dwarven excavation. So these are pins that take place in the campaigns throughout the adventures. So this map here, you could share this with your players. And I'm also going to put it on my notes. So I kind of want to get an overview of the region. Now, why that didn't carry the title, I don't know. So this is the Sword Coast map, player view. So I'll definitely be looking at that. And once I have this in position, I'm going to go ahead and just close it. I'm not going to move it. I like it where it's at. And if I want to pop it back up, it's in my notes. As a matter of fact, I am going to bookmark these notes, drag it down to the hotkeys. I'm going to drop it into area 5. That way, if I accidentally close it, pop it back up from here. And then the map, it's ready to go. All right, so the next thing that I would like to show you is how I organize for a campaign. So this is assuming that this is a published campaign. If this is homebrew, it probably wouldn't be as fancy. But this is a published adventure. There's no reason why you can't do this. So I definitely want the index. That allows you to jump around if you need to. And you have the adventure here. So all I'm going to do, drag the index over. Then I'm going to look at running the adventure. There is basically a intro image, which is really cool, a little artwork. So this is some of the preliminary stuff you need to read before you'd run the adventure. And then Fantasy Grounds has a really nice using this module thing for this particular for Fantasy Grounds. There's special notes, so I definitely want to look at that. So Fantasy Grounds took the trouble, or Smiteworks, to tell you how to run this adventure in Fantasy Grounds. So this is handy. So I'm definitely going to use this. This helps you understand how it interfaces with the adventure. And that is very important. This is a thing that's often missing in a lot of adventures. So I really appreciate that. And this is very helpful for especially a new DM. So that's one thing I would look at. You have the other component. So this talks about the poster map, the DM screen, Fantasy Grounds a little bit. So this, I would probably read it or browse through it, but I really don't need to know everything in there. The Forgotten Realms discusses the region and the backstory and how it goes. So definitely want to read that if you don't know about it. And then the map of Sword Coast. This describes what's on the map and gives you a little backstory on it. So I definitely want that. And then it breaks down into different regions on the map. So first session, it talks about how to, when they create their characters, talks about the options you have for their characters. That you might want to go over with your players. And then you have all these different areas are linked in the map so that you can basically read off what these things are, what they're for, what do they mean. They're like landmarks. So that's what was pinned on the player's map. So when you run for multiple players or for solo players, it has that. Reading ahead, it tells you where the adventure begins. So that's something good to look at. And then if you don't know a lot of the terms, there's a glossary. So that's pretty handy. So for right now, those are the notes that I'm going to look at. And then I'm going to filter this now to the running the adventure. So let me see. I'm going to go back to the index and the adventure begins. So that's where the adventure starts. So I definitely want to read that. And you go to this next page, it tells you about the background. Now, this is something you definitely want to look at. This is important. This sets the history of the actual location, talks about what's happened in the past, kind of explains things why the way they are. And then you have this Phandalin. So you'll probably start off in Phandalin if you haven't played Lost Mine of Phandelver. This is a regional town that players would be familiar with if they've already been here. And you also have exploring it. So there's a map here for exploration. So if you start off in Phandalin, you have a nice town map. So there's a map. And then this talks about some buildings and structures that are in the map. So this is Stonehill Inn, and there's some tales or adventure stories that could come up. So that's pretty cool. So these would be used if you go into the inn and you look at Toblin. He is basically the proprietor of the Stonehill Inn. I've actually done some work for Lost Mine of Phandelver. So if I wanted to add any artwork, I could. So in this case, if I can find it, I made a graphic. So I made a handout for the players for Lost Mine of Phandelver, but I could recycle that asset. So rather than starting from scratch, I can actually use that. So if that was the case, I'm going to go to, I can just drag it into here if I want, or I can make a new group. So I think for maps and images, I don't want to really necessarily mess around with the original. So I'm going to create a new group. So I click on this edit button, click the plus button, and I'm going to just put, custom art or map. So here's some custom art. I'll just put Ice Fire here so I remember what it's for. And then I'm going to drag from my desktop the actual handout. So this handout is pretty big. So I don't want to necessarily use this size, but to show the clarity and the quality of the image, I'm going to use a larger image. So generally, you don't want to use something this big. So here's the Stonehill Inn handout. So it's actually pretty big. So I should be resizing this. But what I've done is made my own little artwork thing, like a collage. And this would be something I'd give out. So he says, "Welcome, travelers, to Stonehill Inn. I'm Toblin Stonehill, proprietor and patron to this establishment. Also a longtime resident of Phandalin. Please make yourselves comfortable and start thinking about your order." So this is something I gave them, I made for Lost Mine, but I can also use it in the context of this game. I also have a map of Stonehill. So I'm not sure if this game gives you a map of that. So I will take a look. So D&D Essentials maps, Dragon of Icefire Peak. So I see a hunting lodge, I see Phandalin, but I don't see the Stonehill Inn. So for some reason, if you needed a map, you can make your own, or you can find them on the DM's Guild, or perhaps you can commission someone to make one for you, however you want to do it. So I'm going to go and grab my Stonehill map. So on the DM's Guild, I was able to find a map of the actual building. Someone must have thought at one point it might be, important to have that. So there's a map, Stonehill Inn, a day and a nighttime one that you can get on the DM's Guild. So I'm going to open up my directory on my computer, and I'm going to drag those over to my new section that I made. So this is custom art. So I'm not putting it in the module. I'm just using it for this session. So I have two handouts. I have this Stonehill map. So here's the nighttime one. So here's the Stonehill Inn. I don't want the players to see map, comma, the Stonehill Inn night. This is for the DM basically, or to organize the image. So I'm going to click this ID. So the only thing they'll see when I share this is this title. So then if you want to pre-share it, let's say you're concerned about, how long it's going to take to load the image, you can right click on the image, click sharing, and preload the image. So when your players connect to your table, the image will load in the background while they're waiting around, instead of shoving it at everyone at once. Or if you have to, you can just right click and share the sheet, and that will share it with the players. So right now, this map also has no grid on it. So let me see if I can change that. So it has a grid painted on here. So layers, and then set grid. And then I'm going to trace on this map. So I'm centering this little icon here in the center and holding down the left control key and dragging this over to where it kind of matches this square here. So it's pretty close. That seems an awful strange resolution. So it's off a little bit. It's close, but it's kind of off, as you can see. So what I'm going to do here is zoom back in, and I click this pound sign, and I can actually shift this over a little. There we go. That's much better. That's pretty close. Maybe one more. Nope, that went the other way. And then for top to bottom, I need to go down one. Nope, that didn't work either. So it's close enough. So that's one thing about having lines already painted on a map, is that they can really be a drag to try to mask over it. And then I'm going to go ahead and size the image. So I'm going to lock it. I'm going to go ahead and click on resize, go to small size. And then if I want to bring this up later, I will size it accordingly. So I'm going to go ahead and size this. And then I'm going to right click on the map, click resize, and adjust the vertical. That way it's completely square. And then I'm going to drag this to my notes. There we go. There's a Stonehill Inn. So anything you want to add to make your game interesting, you can do so. Now I've already shared this image. When you're done with it, if you don't want this map anymore or you're not going to use it, you can click on this little P here. And what it does is it makes it so that it's no longer public, and it frees your memory. So if you're starting getting memory issue, make sure you go back to your images and unshare them. Now the handout that I have with this this Tolvin guy, I can actually link this to the bar. So when the players come here, they can understand that, hey, this is what the guy looks like. I can also share this, or I can share it ahead of time by preloading it. So this might be where they start as the adventure begins, is in this town, and maybe they'll head in here. Another thing is that table that was used for rumors, which was here. I can link that to the map too. So it's already linked to the story entry. So to make this simpler, I can actually link this to the inn. So that way that has that. And then on the map itself, for Phandalin, I can look here, and you see the Stonehill Inn is right here. This brings up the entry that I linked over here. Now, since I have a visual representation of it, I can drop that on there as well. That way, I now have a shortcut to the building itself. And then I'm going to resize this map as well. So I'm going to go ahead and size it, place it where I want it. And then I'm going to right click on it, click resize, and adjust it vertical. There we go. So then I'm going to kind of make it a little bit bigger by dragging this to fit. And I'm going to right click on it again, click resize, and adjust vertical. So now when I call the map up, it will go where I want it. So I'm going to go to Phandalin map. Looks good. I go to the Stonehill map. Gotta put it back where it's supposed to be. That now looks good. Here's the map of the area. And then Phandalin has the location here, location here. But I'm also going to link the Phandalin map to this map, just so it's more convenient for me. So the Phandalin map, I've located on here as well. So just remember, these red pins are not shareable. I mean, they're not shared. You right click on it and make it shareable, then it will turn green and your players will have access to it. So I would do that if they explored an area and there was this little, some kind of information they needed to remind them. I might do that, but usually they're hidden. So hopefully that kind of helps you kind of get an idea how to integrate some of your own materials. Like I said, I got that Phandalin Stonehill Inn map from the actual. I think I got it from the DM's Guild. Someone made that already. There's other maps too that you can find. The one encounter. So that is that part. And then once you get to running the adventure, let's see. Running the adventure, close that for a minute. So I'm going to go to the index, back to running the adventure. And here's the adventure background, and here's the other quest. So you have the starting quest, follow-up quest, and leveling up. So leveling up tells you how to do it. But to be honest, Fantasy Grounds has its own way. But this does explain it in D&D terms. And this also has a direct link to leveling up in the actual the guide for the setting. So that would be in the let's see, they would have that in the Essentials Kit rulebook. So then it talks about follow-up quests. It looks like they have these quest cards. So if you share those, you can pin those up to make it look like they are like wanted posters. These were designed to hand out around a real table. But then you have the quest, and you have the quest reward, which is the treasure, and then you have the location, the loggers camp. So if you don't have a map for the loggers camp, you can provide your own. So I would more than likely just read about these potentials. So it looks like they kind of set this up kind of sandbox. It's not really laid in stone, but basically everything centers out of Phandalin or the region, and your characters go on quests based off what they receive in the adventure encounter. So for the index, And if you go to the adventure background, you can potentially scroll through and get an idea of what's going on in the town, get to know the people. The location called the Townmaster's Hall. So if you didn't have a building for that and you wanted to, you could make your own map. And then you have these location quests, which are based off the Townmaster's Hall, is where you learn about the quests. So I'd put that down here. And there's links here for these. You could also turn this into a table. So if you wanted to do random, you could roll to see which ones they are instead of having them pick one. So these are posted in the main hall. And then follow-up quests would probably be secondary. And then as they leveled up, they could do that. And then there's the adventure, Where's the White Dragon? So this would actually tie in with the dragon's location. And you have all these different locations. So this would determine where the dragon is. So you would roll. So it rolled Star Metal Hills. So you'd click on this link or you'd click on the table. Only the DM sees it. So the Star Metal Hills, it gives you the area, and then it should be linked to the player map. So let's see, there's that. There's the Umbrage Hill. So somewhere in this area, there is some hills where the dragon is located. So it would be on pin number 6. So wherever that is on this map, right here. So this is the Star Metal Hills. So technically, if I was to make this module, I would have had this link to these areas, so it's much easier to find it. Because I had to go to the map and search around. So technically, I would have just linked these maps in here. So that way, I have a direct link to the map. So I'm not, fishing around for it. So I would have technically made, if this was my adventure and I was putting it together, I would actually link some more of the stuff together to make it easier to find stuff. Anything you can do to speed things up. So this is the prep that you would do for this session 0. Session 1 would be basically the execution of these quests. So at session 0, you'd probably find the quest that you're going to do and then create a session 1 where you're going to get together. So the first quest is Where's the Dragon? So this is going to be the lead in to the next session. So here you explore Phandalin, get to know some of the NPCs, get to know each other, work on your backstories, have maybe a little town encounter or something like that. Then once that's done, then you'll start prepping for session 1. So that's all the session 0 stuff. Looks like a lot of stuff, but actually all you're doing is looking through this stuff, reading it, and getting prepped. You know who your players are, you know what the date and time is. So now what you're going to do is actually start getting ready for session 1. I'm going to pull up the calendar again. I'm going to close session 0, or move it actually. And I'm going to set up, let's say my players want to play on the 18th on Saturday. I double click here, call this session 1. So it's going to start in Phandalin. If you had any notes, it would go in here. I'm going to create a new note. close this for now. So that's session 0. Now I'm going to make session 1. Okay, so session 1, Phandalin. Close that. I'm going to link this into here. And then this, once we get to the 18th, I will set the calendar again. So now we are on this day. I can send the date. Let's say this time we're going to start at earlier at 1. Set the time. So for session 1, that's that. And then same thing here. I'm going to drag this note over to there. And then the time. And now I'm going to close this, close the calendar. And as you can see, all the logs start showing up. And then it's also tied into all your notes. So this notepad will be for session 1. So in session 1, for story part, I am going to go to the index. I'm going to link that because you always need this index. And then I'm going to link the where's the white dragon. And then in this case, we rolled on the Star Metal Hills. Okay, so that's what happened in session 0. This is where we're going to start for this adventure. So I have that there. And then I'm going to take the time to research the area. It looks like there's rocky hills or knolls. It's so named because the area has been impact site of number of meteor showers over the millennia. The hills are haunted by ruthless barbarian tribes, giving others little reason to visit the area. So you could potentially set up some barbarian sightings. They don't necessarily have to be encounters, but you can have sightings or signs that they've been in the area. Maybe you find some of their old camps, some kind of nice little backstory stuff. And then once you find the dragon, then you would run that. So where's the dragon? It talks about the location, um, what what happens when the dragon visits an area that is not its lair. It surveys the location from the sky beyond the reach of the characters. So basically, it's going to fly around and harass the players. It is mainly just kind of get people used to it, kind of scare them. So that is basically how this is run. So I don't think this is supposed to be a deadly encounter, but it's a roaming threat, and it can be encountered almost anywhere. So each time the character arrives at a location on the map on the Sword Coast, or prepares to leave that location, you roll a d20 and see abouts where this dragon is. So this is a roaming encounter. This is always happening. So this is a cool thing. So you know if they reach the Star Metal Hills, then they're probably going to have at least a visual encounter with the dragon and maybe a close call. So this is kind of more of a sandbox type of adventure. So when you're running these, you're going to have to keep that in mind. That it's not linear. It's more like, get the quest, go out and do something, then come back. So this is also, let's see. So then there's some starting quests. And if, for instance, they pick one of these starting quests in the beginning, which there's a dwarven excavation there's a Gnome Guard quest, and the actual Umbrage Hill quest. So those are 3 quests. And then the follow-up quests, and then for leveling. So these would be good to have linked here also for session 1. But before I do that, I want to link the map. Save me some work. And then there's the Phandalin quest, starting quest, and then you've determined where the dragon is, so he's in Star Metal Hills. So that's the dragon sighting. So there you go. So that's how you set that up. And once you're happy with that, then you would run that portion of the adventure for session 1. So let's just say they do this one, Dwarven Quest. So if you open up Dwarven Excavation, it's a balanced characters of first level, though second will find certain elements challenging. Characters of third level should have a fairly easy time clearing out the ruins and defeating the orcs that arrive later. So the Dwarven Excavation is actually on the map. So if you go to the main map, yeah, I don't like how they link this, but here's the excavation. So what I would do is if that was the adventure that you chose for session 1, I would link this to the actual notes. I would unlock the excavation and I would copy or link the map. That way it's not such a pain. When you get to know the adventure better, you'll know where all this stuff is. Obviously, I don't know it that well, but here we go. There's that. And then I would link session 1 to that area. So that way it's linked to there. And then as far as you already have the map linked here, and then your session 0, oops, I didn't mean to close the map. Session 0, you would link that to the other map. Let's see. So, let's see. So that can be closed. Session 0, that would be linked to Phandalin. That's if you start there. So that way you can find everything. Everything's kind of linked together. That way you don't get too lost. So now you have 2 sessions set up. And I can bookmark that. And there you go. So Dwarven Excavation, it tells you the level and how easy of a time it's supposed to be. Then you pull up the map and it's balanced adventure for 1st to 3rd level. There's obviously some orcs. So when you run that adventure, you're going to have to pull that information from the material. So if you go to your library and you click here, and here's a quest, you have your Dwarven Excavation, and this is the experience point. So the prospectors found an ancient Dwarven ruins in the mountain southwest of here, and they've been working on archaeological dig, seeking treasure and relics. They need to be warned that a white dragon has moved into the area. Take the warning to them, then return to Town Master Harbin Wester to collect 50 gold pieces. So it's a fairly easy quest, but along the way or the way back or when you're there, it looks like there's a potential that orcs will attack you. So this is just a way to make this more interesting. You can also change it up. You don't have to use what they give you, but it's recommended because it's already balanced and they kind of have an idea of what it should do. So starting quest determine everything. So you get a reward, you have your location details, and then you have your treasure. And then if you wanted to, you can add or take away whatever it is that's applicable. So here, there's the excavation quest, there's the parcel, which is the award, and then there is the actual location. So those three things make up that quest. So that is what you would do to run this. So technically, you can link all of these things to this, since you're going to use this for session 1. There you go. So now you kind of have an idea. So this just gives you gold, and then this is the parcel that goes with the gold. So this would be like your session 1. So your players would choose to do this adventure. They would go to the hills where the excavation is, which is here. And then whatever happens in between is up to you and your players. And you can even have suggested random monsters. So it depends on how you want to run it. Also, is there a map? Sure, there probably is. Let's take a look. So I'm going to get out of my custom area. And I'm going to go to this Ice Spires. And here's the excavation. So here's the gnome area, or the dwarven excavation. This is the DM's map. So you have this canyon, and all the adventures are tied into this map. So if that's the case, you would link this particular location map to here, and then you also have the player's edition, which is bigger and unlabeled. So you would go ahead and link that. So now you would run this entire encounter through here, and you'd put your players on the map in the starting location. So I'm going to drag all my players. Let's say they've chose this adventure, they've made it to this point, and I'm going to go ahead and drag them over. So I did that by dragging the shield over. And this map is super huge. I mean, all this extra space is ridiculous, but that's the way they designed it. So I would have this over here. Same thing with this. Just run the whole thing out of here. And then I'm going to right click on this. And this time I'm going to do the horizontal. That sort of takes care of that. And I need to shrink it some. It's too long horizontally. So I'm going to go ahead and resize, click the vertical. There we go. So now I would also link this dwarven excavation map to this main map. That way I have everything together. So I have my notes, the area explanation, session 1 notes, and the detailed map for the players. And now the players have their starting location, so they're all ready to go. There we go. So this is how I would set this up. So this is basically, hey, thanks Kanala for subscribing. That's cool. Yeah, so this is basically how I would set this up if you were going to run this. So then all you'd have to worry about is everything on this map and then getting back to Phandalin afterwards. So it looks like you have some encounters with some dwarves. Yeah, so you'd read through this before you ran it. And look, God forbid, all this extra space is crazy. But anyways, that's basically how you would do that. So then you would just worry about, getting through this area. Getting from Phandalin to the excavation is up to you. Do they take horses? Do they spend a couple days? You can have a sighting for that dragon, if like way off in the distance, whatever you wanted. So anyways, I hope that's helpful. I'm not going to run the encounter. That would take another hour or so. So I think that's going to be pretty much it for this session. This just tells you how to get started with the starter set and a way to organize your campaign. So to recap, I showed you how I laid out the table. I also explained how to load the modules. I showed you how to use the calendar and how to organize it. You have shortcuts now. You have session 0 all ready to go and session 1. So if I wasn't streaming this, I think my prep time would have been maybe about an hour, including the reading. So that's not too bad. And then in this main session 0, I have all my players, so I know who's who, and I have the dates and times, that sort of thing. So I'd probably go to my Google Calendar, get all the people's emails, and email them the start time. So that way they don't have an excuse saying, "Oh, I don't remember." So this is the way to do that. So if there's any questions, go ahead and ask. I notice you have pins on the player's map too. Do they show? No, they do not. The players only see the map. You can put a pin there and right click on it and reveal it. So if you wanted to see what it does, or if you wanted to give the players reference as to where they've been, you could do that. You can make a story entry and put some notes on it and pin it and then share it. So they would just remember that that was that location. That way they can see where they've been. But as far as the red pins, no, they cannot see that. So hopefully that helps you with the setup. Oh, awesome. I was running with player's map and DM map in the one shot I ran. It was annoying. Good to know that, yeah, they don't normally show those to players. There's really no reason to. The only thing I'd ever do is maybe give them the location name and a couple notes so that they know that they've been to that location. But other than that, there's no reason to share the map with them, or the pins. Any other questions while I got you here? Let's see. Okay. All right, no problem. I'm going to call it a day. Hopefully that helps you guys a little bit. This will be on video on demand, and I will upload it to our YouTube channel tonight, so it'll be available for that. If you run this adventure, this might help give you ideas of how to start. This would also apply to any other adventure, the same methodology. So you take care, everyone, and happy gaming.